It is fantastic to see so many of you here for this event, although it's probably not a surprise given the amazing artwork that is currently on view on the museum grounds and in our galleries down at the west end of the building. But welcome to the museum and welcome to the Peristyle. I'm Scott Boberg, Manager of Programs, and I'm very excited to kick off this evening of conversation between Amy Gilman, our Associate Director, and artist Jaume Plensa. Just want to give you a little bit of information about the format of the evening, and also I'm clutching my phone, not because I'm expecting a call, but because it's a reminder to me to remind you to turn your phone to silent. Now, if you're interested in taking a photo, you may do so. We just ask that you turn off the flash, but thank you for doing that. Now, the conversation will begin. I'm going to introduce Brian Kennedy in just one moment, but after that, it will be a conversation here between Amy and Jaume. And then afterwards, we will have some time for question and answers. So begin thinking about questions you may have for Mr. Plensa. There will be a microphone at the end of each aisle, so look for that. Just come on out and step up to the microphone and we'll alternate in between sides. So if you have a question that's been burning in your mind to ask him, you can do that at the end of the evening, time allowing. We'll get to as many questions as we can. I also wanted to take a moment just to tell you about some upcoming programs because this exhibition coincides with the summertime here at the Toledo Museum of Art. And we are really trying to activate this campus and get you around in some fun and exciting and family-friendly and all kinds of ways to see the sculptures on our grounds and the work inside. And I draw your attention to a brochure that you could find at our front desk or information desk. It's called Summer at the Museum and includes all kinds of events coming up, including a lecture on Saturday by Robin Reisenfeld, who's our new Works on Paper curator. She'll be talking about the working process of artist Fred Tomaselli, whose work is also on view. And also some interesting programs. Once a month, we are doing a Plensa at Twilight tour. So coming up on June 30th, you'll be able to go outside, have a cocktail, and then as it starts to get dark, you'll be able to tour with a museum docent the works on our grounds. And if you haven't seen them at night lit up, they are truly spectacular. So look for those events coming up. And I just wanted to mention one particular event that's coming up on August 13th. And I mention it in part because it's a great collaboration with the Toledo Symphony Orchestra. Of course, the Peristyle is their home, and we are so excited to work with them on and this was inspired by Plensa's love of music and interest in music. And so the museum is collaborating with the Toledo Symphony on a 24-hour Bach festival. It starts at dawn, 6:41 a.m. on Saturday, August 13th, next to the sculpture Silent Music 2, which is just across the street from the Peristyle. It'll be a solo cello to welcome the dawn. And then the concert will continue in the glass salon outside, in the museum spaces, all over. And it will involve the Toledo Symphony, the Toledo Opera Chorus, Adjective New Music, the Toledo Symphony Music School. There'll be performers from around the region. There will even be, in the evening, a Backyard Bach BQ. I was afraid I wasn't going to get that right, but nothing goes together with Bach like pulled pork sandwiches. That's going to be a great thing. But what we're so excited about is here on the stage is really kind of once-in-a-generation performance. At least it's been a while since it's been performed here in Toledo. Is a performance of Bach's Mass in B minor, directed by Sarah Jobin, and that's going to be a truly extraordinary experience in the evening on August 13th. Then you get to stick around and stay till dawn on Sunday. So it's going to be an exciting collaboration with the symphony. We're so involved that the Plensa sculptures are so integral to this. Now, I want to just, as we've been doing lately, showing a little video. Maybe you've seen this online or on TV, but we want to share with you now a 30-second TV spot that celebrates summer here at the Toledo Museum of Art. So if we could play the video, please.
Open up to a world of wonder at the Toledo Museum of Art. Explore lively works of glass, picnic among sculptures, and test all your senses. Summer fun is here. It's free and for the whole family. And you can find it at the Toledo Museum of Art.
All right. I think something in the last 24 hours since it's been online, we had something like 11,000 hits on or views on our Facebook page. It's going to be an exciting summer here at the museum. And now it's my great honor and privilege to introduce the director of the museum, Brian Kennedy.
Well, good evening all, and what a great crowd. I'm delighted to have you all here. I'm going to introduce Amy Gilman and Jaume Plensa. But first of all, I want to do a few thank yous. We're very fortunate that part of the downtown renaissance of this city is the decision of ProMedica to move their headquarters downtown. We're very involved with ProMedica in this regard, and they are our exhibition sponsor for Plensa, so please do thank them. I'd like to recognize some special guests this evening. Delighted to have Mary Sabatino back from Gallery Lalonde to join us, and Jen McMillan from Richard Gray Gallery. They're Jaume Plensa's galleries. Laura Medina is from Spain, and she is Jaume's wife, so make her welcome. I'd especially like to recognize with us this evening distinguished art collectors and philanthropists from Detroit, Maxine and Stuart Frankel. So welcome. Now, when we were offered this exhibition a few years ago, we just knew we couldn't pass it up. We have been thrilled to be the third venue for the show and to show it in a very different way in our 36-acre campus, which was alive last Saturday for those of you who were present for our third block party. We had several thousand people here on Saturday, and it was fun. We had over 70 teams in our scavenger hunt using our app for that, and that was really great. I've never done that. It was just amazing to see them run around and keep at it for 3 hours if they weren't playing in the TMA play space. So the ad that has gone live on TV today really celebrates the upcoming summer. And just to mention also, on July the 14th, Bastille Day in France, we will launch I Approve This Message, which is a major show in the Canaday Gallery about how we vote. And it's about the birth of TV ads for general elections in 1952. We take it all smartly up to 2012. We're leaving out this particular season. And we will be talking about how we are encouraged to vote based on our emotions, not on our intellect. And it's a pretty important show. So delighted also that this summer we're going to have, if you remember, we had murals on the walls around town for our Degas exhibition around the holiday time at the end of the year. And in the summer, we're going to have murals on a lot of buildings all the way down Monroe Street. So we're going to be connecting with downtown in a very live way and helping with its resurgence. But first, I want to thank all of our staff for helping with this show, making it all possible. We're very, very busy. Last year, we were a record number of visitors, about 445,000 people. We're going to be 15,000, 20,000 higher than that this year. So it's been a great, great year at the museum. Recognizing all of our staff, I just particularly want to recognize Claude Fixler, our designer, who's done a fabulous job with this show. Thank you, Claude. Now, Amy Gilman came to the museum in 2005. She was first Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art. She had done her doctorate at Case Western in Cleveland. While she was there, she worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland after completing a fellowship at the Cleveland Museum of Art. She'd also worked in Chicago in the Museum of Contemporary Photography, and she received her MFA in Chicago in 2001 in photography and her bachelor's degree in performance studies. So if you think about this, her 3 degrees, and think about the types of shows we've been doing that she has curated, Small Worlds, and then the leading to Playtime last year, and now Play at TMA, and the Plensa show, you get a sense of what she's trying to do with the campus. And not only that, has helped with acquiring some really important works for the collection. Now, in January 2011, I appointed Amy Associate Director of the museum. She's done a fabulous job, and on July 1 coming, she will be our new Deputy Director after the retirement of Carol Binns. And not to make it totally serious, one thing you might know about Amy is that once upon a time she got 3,000 people to stand naked on the Cleveland waterfront, as part of an artist's performance, of course. Now, Jaume Plensa was born in 1955 in Barcelona, the Catalan capital. He did his studies there. And since 1980, when he had his first exhibition in Barcelona, he's lived and worked in many places, in Berlin, in Brussels, in England, in France, in the United States. He's been a teacher at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He's been a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He's lectured around the world, including here also in Toledo a few years ago. He's received so many awards. He is a Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres in France. He has won the government of Catalonia's National Prize. He was invested with a doctorate from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. In his native Spain, he's received the National Prize for Fine Art, and that was in 2012. And then the next year, the very prestigious Velázquez Prize for the Arts. He's a most distinguished arts practitioner in our world today. We're thrilled to have him here. He shows his works in galleries and museums around the world, in Europe, in the United States, in Asia. In the United States, he's worked here for 3 decades and has had many, many outstanding exhibitions. But a very significant part of Jaume's practice is public sculpture and creating public moments for engagement. He's installed works of art in this manner in Spain, France, Japan, England, Korea, Germany, Canada, the USA. Last week I was in Nice, France, where he has done a major installation of figures on top of columns, very, very high columns, that at nighttime all change colors. It's extraordinary. But I suppose the most extraordinary work that he's made, and many of you know, is the Crown Fountain in Chicago's Millennium Park, which was opened in 2004, one of the largest projects that he's done. His work, as I said, is represented by Galerie Long in New York and in Paris, and the Richard Gray Gallery in Chicago and New York. With that, I want to say you will, as you always do, give the warmest of Toledo welcomes to Amy Gilman and to Jaume Plensa.
Perfect. Well, it's lovely to be here with you all. I'm really gratified to see such a great audience. I know that sometimes in June it can be challenging to come inside from the outdoors, since it is finally so beautiful. So thank you all for coming, and Jaume, thank you for being here again with us. I don't know how many of you were here in 2012 when we installed Spiegel on the museum grounds and invited Jaume to come and give a public talk. When we had the occasion to have this exhibition here, we wanted to have another public moment with you all, but we didn't necessarily want to repeat what we had done previously. So what we'll do over the next 45 minutes or so is have a conversation. And I have some prepared questions here, which I am sure will only last through the first question, where we will then get off onto a conversation that I hope will just take us probably in directions that I could not have anticipated. And then at the end, if we have some time, there are mics that will be available at either end of the audience here, and I'm sure that some of you have other questions that you would love to ask him as well. So we'll just start. So As I was beginning to think about our conversation today, I was thinking about the fact that this is the second time you and I have worked together. It's the second time that we have had you here. The first was for the sighting of Spiegel, and then for you coming back for the talk. And then the second time, we also had you come here before the work was installed. And I thought maybe we could start by talking a little bit about how important the actual sighting of an object is in the public space to you.
Wow. You promised me don't ask me complicated things.
Oh,
Well, obviously, working with a sculptor, you are not thinking only about the object in itself, but about what this object is spreading in terms of energy around. And I guess the space is key, not because the object it's filling up completely the space, but finally the dialogue is with the object and that space. That means that probably the space in where we will install is much more important than the piece in itself, because finally it's an exchange of the personality that recalls the memory of my materials and the space in where we will install. And I guess the show is great for that reason, because something happens.
well, and one of the things that I remember, and this happened with Spiegel, and then it happened again when we were talking about the outdoor work for this show, was that working with Claude and I had really determined a kind of initial layout for the piece that's currently sited at the corner of Collingwood and Monroe, and then for this exhibition for the outdoor works. But some very important adjustments were made when you arrived. And with Spiegel, I don't know if you remember that we had originally wanted it, for those of you who can picture that location, right? There's actually a little rise that hides the parking lot for the CVA building, and we had originally thought that on top of the rise would be where Spiegel would go. Mm-hmm. But you were the one who brought it down off the rise and towards the street. Why did you want to do that?
Well, because I have always a certain utopian idea about what is the art in relationship with society. I guess art should go to them and to try to embrace the community into the idea and the concept of art. And I guess if Spiegel was installed in the top of this little hill, it was in a certain way protected by something that we call museum, or we call power, or we call whatever. But the intention when you invite me to install that piece there was really to link the museum with the community. I remember, I love it, your concept, because it was beautiful, to try to find the right piece as a bridge in between. And in between was not in the top, was really there, where people should take the decision, that is mine, is not from them. That belongs to me. That piece is our piece. It's part of the community. That means I have to respect that piece. I should love this piece. I should live with. And I guess, well, the piece went down to them, which probably it's something normal. If you want to really create a bridge, it's not to create a plinth to a podium. It's to really let the piece at the same level of our human beings that are trying to understand what's happening around.
And your work is so much about the connection between human beings, right? Because sometimes it's very contemplative and interior, but it also is about a dialogue.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because I am still asking myself that the reason why my work could be enjoyed by people in this country or in another country, in this part of the world, somewhere else, and the globality of people that accept or love my work, for me is a mystery, because I'm from a specific culture. I grew up in a very specific geographic area, and others are from other geographic areas, other cultures, other backgrounds. why we can find a gathering place, a common place in where to share something in common. That, I think, is the most beautiful accident that we could get. And my understanding is, as deeper are you going inside of yourself, closer are you going much closer to the others. It seems a contradiction. When you want to embrace everybody, you do nothing. But when you are really trying to go deeper inside yourself, to try to go to really deeper in the origin of your roots, the origin of your ideas, who I am, probably you are talking in a more general way, and you are asking for many others the same question, who we are.
So do you find that in every part of the world, in many different cultures, that people respond to your work in very similar ways?
Well, I guess so. I'm very happy when I'm, I don't know, in China or Japan or in this country. 1 week ago we were in Montreal, today in Toledo. In 1 week I'll be in Shanghai, in 2 weeks in Cologne in Germany, in 3 weeks in New York. Well,
Where do you live?
that's a good question. Okay, that is our job, to put that question in a personal way. But asking ourselves that questions, we are embracing, I guess, every one of us, because I guess we have so much in common than not, much more in common.
So part of it is this, the dialogue with the viewer, with themselves, with the object, and with everyone around them, and also with the space. And the other adjustment that you made when we were citing the works of art for this show was with Heart of Trees, which is the piece that is out by the Gehry Building by the DeSuvero, with the Kentucky coffee trees and the figures hugging them. Why did you think about putting it on the hill? So, because we took Spiegel off the hill, right? So this one went on the hill, but but actually not to elevate it in the way that you were thinking, that Spiegel needed to come down off the hill. It had a different kind of impulse to it.
Well, I remember that we were walking to try to find the right places for each work. It was a beautiful walk. I enjoyed so much because we were a group of friends with 2 gardeners with some flags, I remember. And
Yes, that's what we did.
Yeah, and I love those 2 guys with flags.
Right, Kevin and
Because
Macon, this is a little shout out to you.
whatever I said, they did it.
Yes.
Which is very difficult. and it was really like kids playing. It was beautiful. It was really a terrific experience. And obviously a kid loved to change the normal things. And if you say down, I set up. And if you say, and it's not more complicated than that. But
You know my son, right? My 2-year-old.
in any case, I guess it was a brilliant decision, because you remember that normally I always install that piece in the flat
Yes.
areas, on the flat fields, that the piece is in a certain conversation. But here it was so beautiful, the relationship between the Mardi Zubero with the building. I think is a beautiful building. And in between is a kind of hill, something that it seems that is disturbing the relationship of those works, the architecture and the piece of Mardi Zubero. And I said, well, probably it's because it's a place for community. We install the portrait of these people in conversation with the trees. Mm-hmm. You know, that piece is my self-portrait. Mm-hmm. Covered with the names of music composers that I like it. And it's an old piece. Now I'm a little bit older, but the concept is the same. It's myself trying to embrace a tree, which is coming from the alchemic times of the medieval time, when alchemist was dreaming about what's happened with the death material, with the dead body, And they realized that from the dead body a new life was coming up. And it was in the shape of a tree. And that tree was with the roots in the minerals, in the dead materials, in the dead body. A trunk was like a bridge, and the branches embraced the cosmos. That was the idea of alchemist. And I always liked the heart of trees because that is my tree in some ways, our tree. Everyone has a tree waiting when our body will disappear. Our recalls, our ideas, our things, it seems that will create a bridge, and the branches will embrace the cosmos. And it's a very utopic idea, it's a very romantic idea, but I guess it's brilliant because in those branches we will be all together again, but in a very general way.
That's beautiful. And it struck me as you were just talking about that, something that we were speaking about last night about your upcoming commission in Montreal, that it's a different kind of work, but in this case the figure is above, and the lines of the text in steel now actually become like roots. And you were talking about how we also are rooted,
Yeah.
right?
No, because since always I've been convinced that we are part of the land in where we was born or where we grew up. And I guess it's an amazing information that we can share with others. It's something that we can have in our suitcase to transport and to share with others. Our real reality is our roots. And I always thought that text has this kind of beautiful concept. When we are writing letters in our own languages, we are finally making a portrait of our roots, of our origin. It's probably one of the most beautiful portraits of our background, our language, our way in which we are expressing our ideas, but the roots. And then I only elongate some parts of the letters, creating a certain feeling that the letters has roots, like in the rainforest trees, that the roots are floating in the air and going inside the earth or in the opposite.
Right.
You don't know what is the direction. And those roots, this kind of legs, this kind of lines, are creating the shape of a human body with the text. And I guess it's beautiful because I always thought about this kind of work like poetical shelter that protect us from something else. I don't know, you know. And because if it's raining, the water passes through, obviously. But
Right.
when you are inside, I return to the idea of like a child, that you feel that you are protected, no? That you are embraced for something much deeper. And that is the idea for my piece in Montreal.
But I think that actually translates quite wonderfully to the experience of your work in general. I would say that it is certainly the mood that I feel walking into the Levis galleries where the inside work is installed here, where it's not about that mood is not about the physical space of the museum. That mood is about being surrounded by your work in that space. That it has that kind of, you feel very safe and protected, right? But that also allows you to feel emotionally all kinds of rather remarkable things, I think.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, when I'm trying to describe my work, several times it seems that I'm talking too much about myself, but I could not find another reference. And whatever I'm doing with my work, it's based on my recalls in my childhood, or with my life, with the people that I met and I knew, and all this kind of mix with my readings or the things that the music that I love, make something. But I don't know if that is a protection, because as much as you know, more fragile I felt. And I did a piece many years ago, which was a kind of element in where I said, poetry seriously damage your health. Okay? And I remember that
You could
piece.
say art seriously damages your health too.
Yeah, yeah, because, wow. It's when you find an amazing text, an amazing poem, when you listen to beautiful music, when you are in front of an amazing painting, or something that could be directly to your heart, that is so moving, wow, you feel more fragile. You open...
Because you are vulnerable, because
But
you
that
are
is-
exposed.
That is, I guess, is a quality, but it's also complex and complex. And I have something that probably other visual artists has not, which is I'm a sculptor. I love to be in a sculpture. That means that Mr. Newton was completely against me because he decided the gravity was there. And it means that whatever that you are building should be standing up. And a painter is easy because he paints and is there. Don't drops down from the canvas. But sculpture is something that you can touch and caress and embrace. It's like your body. You are walking and you are standing up in some ways. Sculpture is completely related to your body, but you cannot describe. That means it's a container that you have to breathe a soul. Okay, that means that, okay, obviously I'm trying to do beautiful objects because I guess it's key to send beauty to people, but it's just the container. The importance is what is inside.
Yeah.
And that it's, well, the concept that makes me to talk so much about protection, about to be embraced, about that, because the importance is think that the invisible thing inside.
So let's talk a little bit about the materials that you use, because you are very rooted in sculpture, obviously, and oftentimes, although not exclusively, your materials are often very traditional, right? You've worked in marble, you've worked in steel, worked in bronze, and all of these are things that are actually in this particular show. What makes you decide, or what qualities influence you when you're conceptualizing a work as to how it will be realized in what kind of material?
Well, since always I mentioned that material is not a direction, it's just a vehicle, a necessary vehicle in where to transport or to express your ideas. Obviously it's a support, but the material has also a memory in itself that should be in dialogue with your ideas. And I decided long time ago to be very classic in the terms of materials. For example, Brian mentioned a piece in Chicago, which was made with a video, a mix of video and water and light. I did many pieces like that, but I don't consider those pieces avant-garde. I consider the Crown Fountain very classic, because finally I'm trying to make the representation of a portrait with a technique that is so normal today, like video. Glass, towers, light, kinetic light. That means I could control the sequence of movements of light. I'm working a lot with that, but I continue to say it's very classic finally. Why? Because I'm not thinking about the material, I'm thinking about why I need that material to do what, okay? And that material is just an excuse to talk about something else. Obviously, I'm from the Mediterranean area. From my origins, I need to touch and caress. I should verify with my fingers what I'm doing. I said many times, my eyes are in my fingers. I'm a Mediterranean conceptual artist, which is the worst of the worst. It means because you should verify concepts. Come on, I mean, and it's really complex to be honest with your origins and to be honest with your ideas. It's very complicated sometimes how to manage both.
Yeah, and But I think I really, that's a very interesting point about how the materials really are about serving what you want the outcome to be. What do you want the feeling to be?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess art is based on intuitions. And every time that you are going to, the other day I was saying to somebody, I guess a journalist in Toledo, that the studio for me is like a wishing well, in where every day you throw a coin and you ask for a wish, because you don't know very well what to do every day in the studio. The studio is a place to dream, and suddenly something appears, but you should be there, because if you are not there, maybe it's going away. And the studio is a little extension of your brain. It's nothing else more than that. Your brain is limited, you need a little bit more space. If you have a lot of shows, you need a little bit more space. But finally, it's the brain. The importance is to travel with your studio. I'm traveling with my studio always, which is here, okay? But obviously I need materials, I need constructions, but that is something that is one little part of the work. Believe me that it was so important the day that with your gardeners we were walking in the garden. I learned so much that day. And that is part of the studio, of the piece, of the future pieces that probably don't exist yet.
Sure. So that, that moment of walking around with Claude and the grounds crew, nothing moved as dramatically as Heart of Trees did, from the sort of flat ground to the other space. But you specifically oriented every piece, in part, as you said when we were all together, so that they could see each other, right? So that, and that's not true of all of the works, but they have a sight line to each other. So there's also a dialogue that's happening between the works as well.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy that people enjoy the show, because finally I did the show for myself. Because, no, it's true. I mean, when we were walking, and you remember, you asked me about Paula, the cast iron head.
Yes.
And I knew immediately what was the orientation to face, to where to face.
Yeah, oh yes, I remember standing with you,
Immediately.
and you pointed
Yeah.
exactly where it would
Yeah.
face.
No, because I guess I know perfectly where the pieces should go. Sometimes it's impossible, but because a piece is not a single object in my life, it's a fragment of something wider. Okay, Paula now is here, but Paula is part of a family of works that I continue. It's like, let's say, it's a work in progress. This piece is done, but not completely. And I guess that is the beauty in my work, because one piece, it's part of another, and another. It's like a network, like an extension. And those pieces are facing each other, but maybe some of those pieces are facing my studio, and nobody realized. And some of the pieces in my studio are facing Toledo, and nobody realized. And I guess that is the beauty of my work and my life, because, well, through the years, I installed pieces around the world, and I love to imagine, if I had the capacity to go farther and to look at from above, that the pieces are in
They would all have their little
conversation.
conversation.
Because that is my work. That is the totality, not one or another. That one day could be the image of myself. But
How did you come to be an artist? Did you always know that you wanted to make artwork?
I'm still asking the same question. Because I remember I tried several times, and I stopped several times. And finally, when I was 28, I was living in Berlin, and I said maybe that is the only thing I could do, because the rest was even worse. and and, and I really, it was interesting because I guess I should adapt myself to my intentions. I don't know. I'm still working on it.
You're still working on that. What, I want to just go back for a second to Heart of Trees. Why the composers, and are they composers that are particularly important to you? Or why sort of recognizable names on that work?
Well, I guess when I did my talk here 3 years ago, I guess, I was talking about when I was a child, this amazing experience to be hidden inside the piano of my father and to feel the vibration of that instrument and my body and everything when he was playing without the knowledge that I was in. And that vibration, because it was an upright piano and the harp has a triangle shape which lets the perfect emptiness for a body of 3 years old boy. That was me at that moment. And I liked it to hidden myself. It was in a sliding door. It was great. I remember that vibration, the smell of the piano. It's a lot of things that makes me to approach to music probably in a more, I don't know, biological way than not intellectual way,
Yeah.
I have to say. Because for me, music was the vibration, the perfection of the universe, because everything was at the same moment. Me, the music, the instrument, everything, the world was one. Okay, and I was trying all my life to express that in my work. I mentioned William Blake, how strongly went into my life when I understood one thought feels immensity. That idea that one idea could fill up the space with energy like music.
Sure.
Okay, that means I've been working for several years in parallel of my work in the opera stage design. I did many operas in Salzburg, in Paris, in Rome. I love this idea of art total also, but music. That means that the other day, talking with Mary, I remember that I was talking about how easy it was to make stage design for operas. I said, because if you listen Mozart is God. You are his slave. You must interpret his sound, you know. Okay, music has the power of untouchable, something that is invisible and is even stronger. And it has something extraordinary that it's disappearing at the same time that to be done. I think it's extraordinary. It's probably the only thing that disappears at the same time that you are creating. And, and that for me, as a sculptor, it's my opposite, let's say. And probably that is the reason I love so much music, because it's something that makes a little the balance. And I decided to do Heart of Trees in that way. What is the most extraordinary that could cover my body, that could create my shapes? That means music, but who? Well, people, normal people that try to do music composers.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So, and that actually brings me to wanting to ask a little bit about your use of letters and language, because sometimes you're using letters from multiple alphabets, but not necessarily things that are recognizable as language.
Sure.
And sometimes, as with Silent Rain, you're specifically quoting writings, et cetera. Is there a difference for you on using the letters versus the language as material?
Sure, of course. Yeah.
And sort of, what is the importance of?
Well, because each piece is part of a different family, a different intention. The curtains, I mentioned many times that is also an homage to my childhood when I was with my mother to the stores, and it was the curtains made with metal elements to avoid flies and mosquitoes to go in. And I always like it when my mother was buying in the store, I was playing with the curtain. I invite people to really pass through, and my letters are making this beautiful sound. Bling, 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 all this, okay. But that is for me the idea of poetry. Poetry is protecting us from mosquitoes and flies of life. It's a real protection.
Yes.
And I pass poetry that I really love, poets that really helped me to grow up as a person. I don't know, Dante, William Blake, Shakespeare, Goethe, a Catalan poet, Spanish poets, well, people that was, as the music composers, trying to create something for them, but for everyone. Okay, it's very similar. The curtains are closer to the heart of trees in that concept.
Right.
Okay, when I'm using alphabets,
Yeah.
it's a different way. It's because I'm trying to talk about our roots in the midst of others. That means how well we are when we are together. But to be together, we don't need to lose nothing from our background, from our identity. Because as much as you are taking with you, you have much more to share with others. That means, well, traveling around the world, one day I realized all my friends are talking different languages. Sometimes I don't know their own languages. We found a common language, English or French, to exchange ideas. But maybe this guy is Japanese or Italian, or I don't know. Let's try to use also their own languages. And the curtains are in the original language that the poet was writing the poem.
Right.
But in the case of alphabets, I'm using in many of those Chinese, Japanese, Hebrew, Arabic, Cyrillic, Greek, Hindi, Tamil, Latin, sometimes Korean. Well, I have 8, 10, 11 alphabets that I'm using as a metaphor about everything around the world. It's much more alphabets. I guess in the world it's 196 countries. Not all has their own specific language, but can you imagine how many languages I miss in my pieces? But I'm using this group because I guess it's a nice group. Nothing else than that. And it's a metaphor. And how beautiful and dynamic the pieces are with the mix of different alphabets. When you see the Arabic, which is so like that, very, I don't know, dynamic, instead that Chinese that looks like fireworks, or Hebrew, which is very rigid in the tradition, you know, or Latin, which is really repeating the same and the same, just waiting to put one letter, or Hindi. Hindi is beautiful because it has always a line on top, which is a huge horizon. I suppose the country is so huge that they said, wow, they finish always with a line. It's beautiful, and it's so peaceful. It's beautiful. Everything is happening below, you know. It's just, I guess, if you go deeper inside the calligraphy, the way that people express in one calligram the ideas, you can understand very much one culture, one background. I think it's extraordinary. It's the best portrait in any case about us.
And do you feel that your artwork has a place in in areas that are maybe more have conflict, or is there any kind of dialogue that you're trying to promote in that way that could belong in places like that are in conflict currently, or where I'm not articulating this well. Many of your works have been installed in places that are much more developed, and other. Does your work have a place, or have you ever done work in some place that is still sort of in the midst of conflict, or I don't actually know, like in Israel or in other places where it might have a role in the kind of dialogue that we want to happen?
I have several pieces in Israel. I've been working a lot in Israel when I was younger, and or in China. Or, yeah, well, I remember in China I have one problem one day because, as you know, in our language, a letter is a letter. A is A. Apparently don't means nothing. It's beautiful, but don't means nothing. But in Chinese, the calligram has a meaning.
Right.
And I felt completely passionate with one calligram, and I put over here in the front head. And I remember it's a piece which is actually installed in Shanghai, a beautiful place. And the curator of that project came to the studio to see the piece before to send to them. I said, but Jaume, I have to ask you a pleasure, please. Could you change that calligram over here? I said, why? He said, because it means love. And he said, but that is extraordinary. That it's, I had not an idea, but that's great. Yeah, but for our culture, it's very embarrassing. Okay. We did a project also for a collector in Seoul or in Korea. A very big piece, beautiful. And when he came to my studio, he saw one Korean calligram. And he said, Jaume, may I ask you a favor? What? Could you change that calligram? Why? Because it means red. He said, but it's a beautiful color. Yeah, but for us, this calligram red means North Korea.
Oh.
Okay. But that I think is
So that red, which we think of it as like referencing a color, actually references a whole.
yeah. But we can continues talking about little histories like that, which are not a mistake in the piece. It's thanks to that I learned much more. The collector and me, both of us. And I love when they ask me corrections because I am understanding their culture much
Yes.
better.
Yes.
Okay? And because for me, love or red. But can you imagine maybe green for Canadians are terrible? I don't know. Okay? But
You'll find out when you do the Montreal piece.
okay. But that I think for me is a passion. I think it's so passionate because it's always a certain danger in every piece because maybe somebody will arrive and say, "What's that?"
Yes.
It says I don't know
It says
yellow,
this.
and it's the yellow is wrong. Okay.
So I want to I want to be conscious of time, and I want to give others the opportunity to ask some questions here. So I know that we have some microphones on either side of the aisle. And does anyone have any questions for Jaume here tonight? I hope so. I mean, I have lots of other things to ask, but I wanted to give you all the opportunity because I've been running into many of you, and I know that you have questions. So, oh yes, I can see a whole line. Okay.
Two lines.
2 lines. Okay. Well, we will alternate. How about that? It's not on. So how do you choose your faces, the subjects?
Well, actually, suddenly you found a person that you believe has the right face because it has the right content. I mean, the face is together with the aura of that person. And then I asked them if they could accept to be a scan in my studio, and then we do a scanner of the.
So are some of them just strangers and some of them people you know?
No. I don't know. It's people from all over the world. Sometimes it's people that I know. Sometimes it just, I don't know, for an accident, you are there and you say, who is that person? And I ask them, do you mind to? if I take your portrait and have people from this country, or from Sweden, from Brazil, from England, from Germany, from all over the world, from China. I mean,
I want to thank you for using Tamil. It's a dying language and a dying culture, so by your even using the letters, I think it gives more. That was part of my grandfather leaving Sri Lanka in 1915, and I'm Malaysian, and I know you did Singapore Soul, so again, thank you. The other thing I wanted to do is, we've had Salvador Dali, we've had Picasso, and now you. How is it that the Catalan culture can produce such innovative artists and musicians? Is there something magical in the water or the genes? And then the last question, and I'm going to sit down, is the three figures you have, see no evil, hear no evil. If you look closely, the words are like panic and psychiatric disorders. I also happen to be a psychiatrist, so again, could you explain why you put them at different levels and why the words are where they are? Thank you.
wow. I should answer? Well, for the first question about my Catalan origin, I have not answered, honestly. I mean, I grew up there, and I'm living in Barcelona. It's a pleasure to live there, but it's funny that I have not this relationship, as you mentioned, with all those guys, because for me are part of my family. I not consider amazing because I grew up always with them. And Gaudí, Miró, Tapias, Dalí, Picasso, all those people are, you are talking about my uncles, my grandfathers, my, you know, my brothers. And I guess Barcelona has something really interesting, which is a certain brief of all the perfumes and taste of the Mediterranean area. It's like a conclusion of many things from all the Mediterranean area. Wherever you are in the Mediterranean, you feel home, because it's very similar. Some details are changing, but Barcelona has a little bit of everything. A little bit of everything, as you mentioned about those concepts of psychiatric, because I have many works in the way that I'm mentioning something that people call diseases. And, but for me, just a little bit more or less, I know could be very complicated, but unfortunately, when we are perfect is when we have a little bit of everything, of all those diseases. And the piece that you mentioned, that in a very funny way, I'm always talking about them as a fat angels that are fixed on the walls because they are so fat that they could not fly. And they represents pretty well myself and many others, because I'm trying since 60 years to fly, and it was impossible. And but even with my mistakes, with my default, I could illuminate life. And I guess it's a beautiful metaphor about human beings, that we are never really catching our dreams. But we are trying. But even with our limits, we have an amazing capacity to illuminate the life of others. And I think that piece is an homage to all of us, that in that way we are trying, we aim to really catch something a little bit wider than our recalls or our dreams. And I guess that piece is a little bit in that direction.
Yeah, I appreciated when the conversation about the citing of a piece out among the masses, the conversation maybe with the community. And if I might, when I think about the question would be, when I think about, for example, the highway going through here, and I've been told that back in the days when the highway was cited, that was the purpose of the highway. In some ways, the citing of it was to separate communities, separate the African-American community from the Caucasian community. There's been a conversation, an ongoing conversation at this museum about the accessibility versus the elite, versus that it could stray into these increasingly less accessible, very highbrow kind of spheres, because it's a great museum. It's a world-class museum. It's the gem of this area. And yet, in the history of this museum, there was a great involvement in children, a great community involvement. And again, that's why I really appreciated when you went to such great pains in the citing of a piece like, for example, Spiegel, to put it out with the community. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, and I appreciate that. And sorry, it's not a highbrow question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know really if that is a question really about what it is that
No,
we.
it's not a question.
Okay.
I think it's in the statement. It's fine.
Good.
Thank you.
Do you want to?
The museum sponsors a number of classes here, one of which is a sculpture class in welding. And I had a great pleasure in trying to figure out and build something according to the type of work you do with numbers and letters. It was a beach ball sized piece of work. It had like 60 elements to it. So it took me months to build it, but I had a lot of fun with that. That was a real pleasure to build it. But I have a couple of questions. I found that I had to use a computer-driven plasma cutter to cut out the letters and make them uniform. I suspect you had to have the same thing with yours. And as I was building my little model, I found that I couldn't figure out, as I put the letters and numbers in place in order to fit the form. I didn't have an idea at the beginning that my A would be here and my theta would be here or whatever. Is that the same experience that you had, sir?
So I think what he's trying to get at, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is sort of how do you end up constructing sort of the actual, like, technically putting together something as complex as the letters and how you get them so uniform, and are you using laser cutter in order to do that? Am I getting to the?
You're very close.
Okay.
You're very close.
Sorry, I'm a little bit complicated with my. No, I mean, I think it's pretty easy because normally I'm making, let's say, a model which has the human body, the shape of the sculpture that I want to do in the real size, and then with my team we are bending the letters following the shape of the model. That means like a tailor that is making a new skin on top. No? We are just following, and when we are ready, we just take the model off, and then the piece is done, let's say. No? It's like a mold, but in a positive sense. It's in the opposite.
Thank you.
I think we actually probably only have time for one more question. So whoever is at.
Senor. Going back to when you were talking about your alphabets that you use, many text artists incorporate elements of graphic design, and they usually design their own font types. Do you design your own font types? And if so, when did you start going through that process?
So the question is, do you actually design your own font types, or are you taking the letters from?
No, I taking the letters. Normally from a very normal alphabet typographies, for example, Helvetica Medium, which is very neutral. It's the base of my work. Universe sometimes, but Helvetica Medium is the one.
Thank you.
So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jaume, for all of your time here, and I hope that you will join us. I hope that if you have not had a chance to go through the exhibition, I hope you will do so, and I hope that you will walk the grounds, both now while it's light, and if you haven't discovered it already, all of the sculptures are also lit and at night, and we would encourage you to also take a walk around the grounds. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.